Hey, good morning, guys. This is Mr. McVay on Monday, September 21st, and I'm going to try to do something different. So, if you watched, if you did Friday's test, you'll notice there was an announcement about late work, a video announcing what we're going to do. And so, basically, what I'm hoping will work this time is I can get more of you in the virtual world to participate more and participate better. For those of you who have got on every day and you follow directions up to this point, simply say thank you. Thank you for making my job a whole lot easier. However, I've got to get the attention of some other folks, and maybe this will help, because obviously asking students to log on each day, watch some kind of Khan Academy video, and reading some notes as a review, and then doing a lesson has proven to be a bit challenging. So, with the activities that we got coming up, I'm going to just save Microsoft Word documents. I'm going to save that for journal writing and possibly when we get ready to write essays. But for the most part, you'll see that last week I had to do some practice quizzes that gave you immediate feedback. And hopefully that works better for you, because it works better for me. I don't have to spend my whole weekend grading Microsoft Docs and getting that back to you in a timely manner. So what we're going to do today, and I need you to log on each day and watch the video, go over your notes, or go over the notes while we watch the video, and do the activity and get your feedback immediately. And that way, if you have questions, you can obviously see me during the live conference time if you need additional help. And again, this is how it's going to look from here on out. I'm going to record lessons. I'm going to give them to you as they are given into the class. You may notice I have the same shirt on multiple days, and that's because I'm recording multiple lessons ahead of time. So I do change clothes from time to time. With that being said, what we're going to do today, we're going to talk about comma rules, the 6 comma rules that affect high school and college writing, and hopefully after this we can become better editors, much like with pronoun antecedent agreement, subject-verb agreement, active and passive voice. And now I'm going to add the 4th most common used mistakes in high school and college student writing, and that is the misuse or the lack of use of commas. So I'm going to go over the rules today, and then I'm going to give you a little assignment to see how well you understand commas. And if you haven't figured it out by now, when you take those little practice things, you can view your results. And if you miss something and you don't understand, that's where I really need you to go back and look at the rules. And if you don't understand, you can always check with me live, virtual A 130 and virtual B 220 for further explanation. So we're going to try this because I've got my feet under me, and I feel like I can move forward now with doing Schoology online and giving you all a better opportunity to see what's expected of you. So here we go. I'm going to talk about commas. How exciting, right? Yes, but they are problems in writing. So what is a comma? It's the most common used mark of punctuation. It's used mainly to group words that belong together and to separate those that do not. Some other uses have little to do with meaning, but are simply customary ways of punctuating sentences. Rule number 1, items in a series. You're going to use commas to separate items in a series. Well, what is items in a series? This could be subjects, this could be verbs, this could be phrases, this could be nouns, this could be direct objects, indirect objects, this could be predicate nouns, things of that nature. It could be adjectives, and it could be clauses. So the items in a series could be a very multitude of things. It could be anything dealing with grammar. So whenever you have more than 2, you're going to have items in a series. So what does it mean to have items in series more than 2? If you look at the example, number 1, there were books on the desk, posters on the wall, and clothing on the floor. And hopefully you learn from subject-verb agreement that anytime a sentence begins with there or here or where, the subject's going to come after the verb. So this is not the subject, but I do know that's a linking verb. But what were there? What are we looking for? We're looking for books. That's my subject. Posters is a subject. And clothing is a subject. And the rest of this stuff is prepositional phrases that kind of modify. But anyway, what are my items in a series? I have more than 2 subjects, so I'm going to separate each items in a series with a comma. I don't want to put it after the subject because the phrase completes the meaning of the book. It tells me where they are. So a prepositional phrase tells me where they are. It may modify what kind, but anyway, a prepositional phrase is a modifier. So I want to include the modifier with the subject. Place a comma here, place a comma there, and I'm going on. Another example of items in a series would be, she brought apples, oranges, macaroni and cheese, and soda to the picnic. Who's it about? It's about she. What did she do? She brought. Well, this is an action verb. What did she bring? Apples, oranges, macaroni and cheese, and soda. To the party or to the picnic is a prepositional phrase. So these items in a series, and you notice we got more than 2 items in a series, and they are direct objects. So I'm going to separate each one with a comma. Notice I don't put a comma after soda. The prepositional phrase modifies soda. Okay? So it can be an adjective, if all items in a series are placed or joined by and or, do not use commas to separate them. So the second item in the series, this is the exception to the rule. And if you haven't learned anything yet about English, is that we have tons of exceptions to the rule. So here's the rule, here's an exception. Anytime the words, the items in the series are joined by or and again, you've got to have this 2 times or more, but you got to have more than 2 items. And so the weather forecaster predicted rain, he also predicted sleet, and he predicted snow. So who's it about? What did he do? I apologize, I messed up. It's about a forecaster. What did he do? He predicted. It's an action verb, so what did he predict? My items in the series are rain, sleet, and snow. And they're separated by or, which makes that the exception to the rule. I don't put a comma when they are separated by and or. So again, exceptions to the rule. It would be nice if English was simple, but it is more complicated than that. Okay? If you see me moving around, and again, I want to make sure you get what students are in class are getting, and hopefully this will make a little more sense. Okay, going on with items in a series. I'm going to use a comma to separate 2 or more adjectives coming before a noun. So preceding means before. Coming before a noun. So use a comma to separate 2 or more adjectives. She is an alert, outgoing, energetic person. She is my subject. This is a linking verb. What is she? She's a person. So this is called a predicate nominative. It simply renames what she is. All right, she is a person. However, in this case, we have more than 2 adjectives describing person. We got alert, we got outgoing, and we got energetic. And so since they all come before the noun, I'm going to put a comma there. Notice right here, the next rule, do not use, this is still pertaining to items in the series, but the next example, do not use a comma before the final adjective. In a series, it's adjectives thought of as part of the noun. All right, so we've got an adjective right here, a November day. We've got 3 adjectives modifying this proper adjective. So I've got cold, raw, dark, all modifying November. So a lot of times students would say, well, is the word all modifying day or is it November day? And I think the adjective is thought of part of the noun. I think this is part of the noun. So instead of just saying that's a proper adjective, in this case, November day would be the noun. So here I have cold and raw. I'm not going to put one after dark because I'm considering November day as part of a compound idea. Okay? Moving on to the next example. If one of the words in a series modifies another word in the series, do not separate them by a comma. Now this is confusing. I've got he wore, what did he wear? This is an action verb. He wore a blazer. He wore a blazer. Well, what color was it? It was blue. This is an adjective. What kind of blazer? Well, it was a what color? Adjective. of blue. When then bright modifies blue. All right, and here this idea is you're going to have two or more adjectives modifying the same noun. Here, bright is modifying the adjective. It's not modifying the blazer. It's modifying blue. So again, when you have multiple adjectives modifying a noun, be careful. The adjective could modify the adjective. If that's the case, you don't use commas. If both adjectives are modifying blazer, then I would by all means use a comma there. All right, so that's a lot for Rule 1. Looking at Rule 2 is next. And this is the big problem for high school and college writers. And whenever you don't use a comma before and, but, or, nor, for, or yet, I call these fanboys. It's an acronym to remember your coordinating conjunctions. A lot of students don't know that for can be a conjunction. But anytime you have a subject and verb or an independent clause coming after these words, you need to use a comma. So learn your fanboys. These are your coordinated conjunctions, and, but, or, nor, for, or yet. Unless the clause is very short. Now if the clause is very short, there again, there's the exception to the rule. But for the most part, we don't write very short clauses often in high school and college writing. So when you go back and edit, here is what we look for. I have a subject, I got a verb, I've got a subject, and I got a verb. And I've got the word but here. So again, I'm looking for independent clauses separated by a conjunction. And in this case, I've got a independent clause extending on by itself, so I need the comma. What happens in high school and college writing is that you forget to put the comma, and now you've got this error called a run-on. This is what run-ons look like, is when you fail to put a comma. And I have been in a college class before where the professor was like, one of these errors equals a C, two of them equals an F, and I hope you never have one of those teachers in college. So a lot of times you can get someone who just thinks this is the worst error you could ever make. And some people just don't care. But anyway, moving on. Look at the second example. She purchased a new pair of shoes. What'd she do? She purchased shoes. Okay, good. What else did she do? Oh, she planned. Got another action verb. To dance at the ball. Those are infinitives and prepositions. So the key idea is that we see subjects and verbs on each side of the conjunction, and when that's the case, you make sure you use your comma. Again, if you don't use a comma and it's not there, it's called a run-on. Okay, so that's the definition of a run-on, is when you forget to put the comma in that situation. When the conjunction joins two verbs, not two main clauses, a comma is not used. So sometimes students get this confused, but again, you're looking at the compound idea. Is this a compound verb or is it a compound sentence? I, as a subject, gave what I gave advice to Mike and got some from him. So I gave and I got. But it doesn't say and I got. It says I gave and got. So this is my verb, and this is my verb, making this compound verb. No comma is needed if there's not a subject right here. So since I don't have a subject, I don't put a comma. And so when the conjunction joins two verbs, not two main clauses, a comma is not used. Okay, moving on. Rule number 3. Use commas to set off non-essential clauses and non-essential participle phrases. Well, what is non-essential? Well, we had this in subject-verb agreement where if you didn't quite understand what non-essential meant, it simply means not important or not needed. It's really not needed to make sense of the sentence. So if I look at the example, Bill Lee will attend Ohio State this fall. I've got some information between the subject and the verb. Hang on just a minute. So, record class. That's okay. I need to put a sign. I thought Miss Smith, you were sleeping. Hey, students to be interrupted just like they are here, right?
Yeah.
Can I do it right now?
I don't care as long as you put it right in there.
I told her you was asleep.
Miss Brooke, you gonna say hey to the kids? You go over and say hey to the kids.
Yeah.
All right.
You guys set up nice in here, look at you.
Yeah, he.
Oh, wow.
Hey, there you go. Hey, Miss Brooke. Oh, that's okay.
I'm so sorry.
Hey, that's okay. I tried this last week and it doesn't work. I need to put a sign up.
They need to put time to say record.
Hey, you know, I'm a day late, but I was short.
You beat Bob.
Yes, sir. All right, so that's what happens in class. I get interrupted, so that's it. I need to take better care. But anyway, Bill Lee will attend Ohio State this fall. Now, that would be fine by itself. I can take this clause out and it'd be okay. Bill Lee will attend Ohio State this fall. However, we get this information, not important information, about he was offered scholarships to 3 colleges. So again, I've got all this other stuff, subject and verbs, direct object. Yes, it's a clause within a clause, but when that clause is not important, you simply put commas here and here. Same thing here. My cousin Carol, the girl who loves adventure, wrote the story. Who's it about? It's about Carol, or is it about cousin? I think it's about my cousin Carol. She wrote what she writes, story. And then I've got this information, girl who loves adventure. I've got a clause within a clause. So whenever you have a clause within a clause and you don't need it, because the sentence makes sense, my cousin Carol wrote the story, the girl who loves adventure is not important to meaning your sentence. So whenever you have a non-essential or a not important clause or participle phrase, you simply set it off with commas. And you have to understand, it's not the main subject and verb. It's the dependent. And we'll talk about dependent as the year goes on. Here's an example of something being important. It's important to the meaning sentence. Bill Lee is the only senior who won scholarships to 3 colleges. Bill Lee is the only senior who won scholarships to 3 colleges. The same idea, but I've kind of changed the context. Bill Lee, he is the only senior who won scholarships to 3 colleges. This is important to the meaning of the sentence, so I don't need to put a comma after senior. So that's an example of, well, when is it important? It's important when you need this to make this make sense. So if you're using a clause or a phrase to help add information that is needed, you simply don't use commas. Okay? Rule number 4. Use a comma after certain introductory elements like well, yes, no, and why. Oh, yes, well. I wouldn't be too sure of that. All right, so that's a kind of like it's an idea that doesn't show up much until I ask students to start writing a little bit more creatively. But again, if you don't use these in words, these words in sentences when you write, then it's no big deal. But here in rule number 2, or it's the second example of rule number 4, you'll see this a lot. A participle phrase. If you don't know what a participle word is, it's a verb-looking word that ends in ing, but it's going to act like an adjective. And we'll talk about participles later. And so when I do, and I ask students to use them in writing, they forget to use the comma. But anyway, if I ask you a sentence, ask you what the subject is, some of you would say kid or whatever. But once you learn that this is a participle, behaving like a spoiled kid, it's kind of like a prepositional phrase. This is a participle phrase. And whenever they come at the beginning of a sentence, you simply put the comma here. What's my subject? He pouted and sulked. That's my verb. So I've got subject and verbs after the participle. If it comes after, put the comma there. Another example, use a comma after a succession of introductory prepositional phrases. So if you have a prepositional phrase that kind of confuses with the subject, with the weak, comma, competition is unpopular. If I don't put a comma there, it says with the weak, competition is unpopular. So I need to pause somewhere. Anytime I have a prepositional phrase at the beginning, I always tell students, put a comma there if you're not sure. Like right here, after the ice storm, comma, the power lines were ruined. If I don't pause there for a moment, it kind of runs into the next idea. So whether you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 prepositional phrases at the beginning of a sentence, it's always a good idea to put the comma before the subject. Rule number 4, use a comma after an introductory adverb clause. Again, this is kind of like rule number 2, when we start talking about introductory phrases and clauses, make sure that you put a comma there. Can you begin a sentence with because? I always ask that question to students because somewhere in elementary school they tell you not to, but now that we're in high school, yes, you can begin a sentence with because. It's a dependent clause or an adverb clause. You just got to learn to use this comma. Because the girls talked, comma, the guys watched the football game instead. While the girls talked, comma, the guys watched the football game instead. So again, anytime you've got a dependent clause that begins with an adverb subordinated conjunction like while or because or since or if, you want to stick that comma right there. Okay? We're almost done. Almost done. Use commas to set off expressions that interrupt a sentence. Again, we had this in subject-verb agreement, so hopefully you saw that sometimes when you have these interruptions or expressions in the middle of a sentence, you need to set it off with commas and a positive or an appositive phrase. If you don't know what an appositive is, it's a noun that adds information to another noun. So if I look at the example, Mr. Joe Boyle, Hartley's principal, will be away on a requested conference. Well, who's it about? It's about Mr. Joe Boyle. What'd he do? He'll be away on a requested conference. This right here is just a noun adding information to another noun. So noun adding information to another noun. And this is called your positive. So if you don't know what a positive is, we'll talk about those later as well. But anyway, whenever you have a positive that's here, I'm going to put a comma here and here. So a positive normally follow the word they modify or add information to. Number 2, words used in a direct address are set off by commas. I don't know, Alice, where your brother is. So anytime I address a person, and that's what a direct address is when I say someone's name. I don't know, Alice, where your brother is. Or it could be at the beginning, Alice, comma, I don't know where your brother is. It can come at the end. I don't know where your brother is, Alice. And I will put that at the end. But anywhere you put in a sentence, whether it's here or here, you want to put a comma before it, comma after it, or comma on both sides if it's in the middle of the sentence. Number 3, an expression is set off by commas. On the contrary, jogging is relaxing. Again, I can put this anywhere in the sentence, and if I put it in the middle, I need commas on both sides. Jogging, on the contrary, is relaxing, so I would put it on both sides. But an expression can come anywhere in a sentence, just like a direct address can come anywhere in a sentence, and when you have those, you've got to use commas. Again, if it comes at the beginning, we'll put a comma after. If it comes at the end, we'll put a comma before, and if it comes in the middle, we'll put it on both sides. Okay? Rule number 6. These are things that have been talked about for a long time and aren't necessarily a problem. They do show up on some standardized testing. It does not show up on the ACT very often because this is not very higher level thinking. They think you should get this by now, but here we go. The baby was born on Monday, comma, May 3rd, comma, 1996, comma, Toledo, Ohio. So you always want to separate your city and state. A lot of students put that comma after. Some people will put it after. So if you're putting the comma between city and state after, you want to make sure it goes between. But this is what gets students sometimes. They don't know that a comma goes after the day. Y'all know where it goes between the date, but some of you forget where it comes if it's written like that. So day, date, year, city, state. Okay? That's just a review. Number 2, for rule 6, use a comma after a salutation. Well, if you don't know what a salutation is, that's the opening of a friendly letter. And when you close it, so the salutation and closing. Dear Maggie, a friendly letter. Sincerely, yours truly, thank you, comma. So again, there's an exception to this. If you're writing a business letter or a business email or something like that, you'd use a colon. But in a friendly letter, we're going to use the comma. Use a comma to set off contrasting elements. Her intelligence, not her beauty, gave her an advantage. It's kind of like that expression that we talked about a while ago. but I can't move this one around and make it make sense. But if it's right here, her intelligence gave her an advantage, and this right here is just something to contrast the idea. Again, it's just a writer's craft. You use commas right there to set that off. Number 4, use a comma to separate unusual word order. Diligently, she did her homework. Now, this is an adverb. She did her homework diligently. I don't normally encourage this, but if you get to where you feel like you're an experienced or better writer, you can you can move your adverb around and put commas here to make it unique, so to speak. So she did her homework diligently, probably the best way to do that. But if you want to add emphasis to the word diligently at the beginning, comma, she did her homework. Kind of changes the context a little bit. Here's another example. The dress, new and crisp, hung in the closet. The new and crisp dress. Again, there are words that should come before dress, but again, if you want to, this is one of those weird ones where this is really a writer's craft. So if you feel like you're a good writer and you want to change your style a little bit, you can move your adverbs and adjectives around to add emphasis to those. But normally we would say, the new and crisp dress hung in the closet. But the dress, new and crisp, almost sounds like a fiction writer or a creative writer. All right, number 5, use a comma to set off direct quotations. The example here. Please practice your lines with feeling. A lot of students want to put that comma after the quotation mark, but the comma goes inside the quotation mark. So use a comma in a direct address inside the quotation. Please practice your lines with feeling, comma, quote. It goes before the quotation. And we'll see that when we start citing work. Number 6 of Rule 6, use a comma after a name, followed by junior, senior, PhD, or some title. Frank Howard Jr., notice I put a comma here before the title. Hazel Sellers, she's a PhD, physician doctor. I think that's right, physician doctorate. Anyway, you put the comma before the title. So anytime you have a title, put it before. Last but not least, number 7. Use a comma to separate abbreviations after names. Did you invite John Paul Jr. and his sister? So I'm going to separate it like it said before. So I always put a comma before the title. And then after the title, if you have stuff coming after it. So you could have a compound, direct object, or just some other information coming after it. So John Paul, comma, junior period, comma, and his sister. Again, Rule 6 is more about reviewing things that you've seen throughout elementary and high school. I would pay close attention to rule number 1, rule number 2, and rule number 3 and 4. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 are kind of things that I harp on a lot in high school and early college writing, so maybe that will help. All right, so there is today's lesson on comma rules and the review. You got to experience all today as if you were in school. You had an interruption by Mr. Bridford and Miss Rich, and hopefully Mr. Bridford said hi, but that's what happens here at Goshen. So hopefully 29 minutes will not go by that long for you. But remind you, if you're on the virtual end of learning, you need to be spending a minimum of, I think it's 25 minutes and the maximum of 40 minutes on each class each day. So I'm going to try to keep you within that time frame, and I have been up to this point. But like I said, I need to do something extra. If that's putting these recordings out there for some of you. But again, log on each day, read the agenda, see what's expected of you. If you can get by the notes and not necessarily have to watch me or whatever, that's fine. Do your practice. I wish you would watch the review, me going over notes, because when I start going over reading comprehension, many of you aren't going to understand the rhetorical triangle, ethos, logos, pathos, what it is I get students to look for in nonfiction pieces. So if this is long and boring to you, the next few days and a couple weeks may be as well, because we're going to read nonfiction pieces that show up on ACT testing, and basically I'm going to teach you how to read like a college professor. So we've got to get better at that. And so with all that being said, I hope you have a great day. If you have any questions about the activity, you're not sure about something, see me during the live at 1:30 for virtual A and 2:20 for virtual B. Y'all have a great day.